Hello, everybody. Welcome into SportsDay Insider presented by the Dallas Morning News. I am Kevin Sherrington, joined by my pals Evan Grant and Calvin Watkins. As we are discussing all this today, we had some news breaking on the Cowboys that they have released Trevon Diggs with one game to go in the season, which seems a little crazy to me. I mean, you only had to put up with him for another week, but I guess that he had just finally pushed them too far to the brink. Because Calvin, here's my big thing about this is that they saved themselves $12 million over what they would have cost him next year on the roster. If they had made this a post June 1st cut, they would have saved $15 million, which doesn't sound like a lot, and it isn't a lot, but $3 million might get you the services of a backup left tackle or something like that.
Principles are principles, Kevin. Let's be very clear here.
Yeah, they got them. They got principles, all right. I don't know, but it's hard to say that any Jerry Jones team has principles. But anyway, so Calvin, give us your best estimate of why they did this now with Diggs.
I just think it's one game to go, as you said. Putting him on waivers allows the team to say, "Hey, look, he's healthy, right? And he can sign for playoff team, right? If somebody wants to claim him off waivers, because by playing Diggs, if he would have gotten hurt, right, they would have been on the hook to rehab him or reach an injury settlement with him, and that's something they didn't want to do. So they were kind of tricky. They said, let's play him, and they think he played 2 games, and then they got rid of him. So it was also a lot of other issues going on with Diggs. After the game on Christmas Day in Landover, he did not fly back with the team back to Texas. He was the only player that did not fly back with the team. There are reports that he asked to stay in Maryland. That's where he's from. And Brian Schottenheimer said, no, you got to come back home with everybody else. So it was that, being late to team meetings, not doing the rehab assignments the way they want him to, just not working the defensive scheme, complaining about the defensive scheme. All of these things kind of added up. And I guess on a Tuesday afternoon, they decided to part ways.
And the thing about that concussion, I heard the story was that he was installing a TV on his patio and it fell on his head.
Yes.
I mean, first of all, I wouldn't install a TV on my patio. Why in the world would Trevon Diggs do that? That seems like a bogus explanation to me. I mean, he can afford to pay somebody to install a TV for him.
Maybe he likes being handy around the house.
I agree with Evan. Yeah.
Clearly, you guys need to go back to journalism school for a little more cynicism and develop some deeper questions. I'm thinking that somebody brained him. But anyway, whatever happened to Calvin, whatever happened to Trevon Diggs, he's out of here now. That's a whirlwind tenure with the Cowboys, isn't it? He went from being a guy that was, some guy with some promise, looked like he might be pretty good, to being really good, kind of looking a little bit like Deion Sanders back there. I mean, just a guy with tremendous speed and ability to recover and track receivers. And then the next thing you know, he's a guy that it seemed like everything seemed to go downhill for me after the trade of Micah Parsons, or did it? Or was it even before that, Calvin?
I think it was a little bit of both. He was close to Micah Parsons, and when Diggs was doing his rehab work in Florida, Parsons said that he would fly down there to offer some support to Trevon Diggs for his mental health. And then they trade Micah Parsons, and then Diggs, I think, kind of sulked a little bit, but then he decided he finally said, "Hey, this is a business, and I understand it. I gotta move on." And this whole thing is just a weird thing because it's not like Diggs is a bad guy, right? It's just that somebody had said to me, they asked me, does Diggs love football, right? because we all know people who are just doing their jobs but don't really love their jobs, right? So, and Diggs came
There'll be a
across as
couple
if
people on this panel right here.
yeah, exactly. And Diggs is so talented, right? I mean, you watch him in practice, he'll just grab a ball out of the air with one hand and make an interception. He is that talented. But I think the passion for the game is different in comparison to, say, Micah Parsons or Dak Prescott's, right? To me, Diggs was like, I just play football and I get paid, you know? And that might have irked people the wrong way.
And let me say this about that, because I think there's a real good parallel on the beat that I cover, and I think that it was very obvious to everybody in the stands, everybody watching, that baseball was just a job for Jonah Hyman. It didn't look like he really enjoyed it over the last year, and I thought there were any number of times in the second half of the season that the Rangers needed to send a message and either bench him or release him at that point in time. They weren't going to save anything. It wasn't going to save them money, but it would send a message. And I will say that, if this was the case, if Diggs was giving off body language to everybody, like he wasn't passionate about the game, that he didn't really enjoy the game, and you are trying to get a head start on culture for 2026, I'm all for like saying, okay, we can't have this. We're going to move on. I can be cynical and say, yeah, it's great to have principles when you're eliminated from the playoffs, but at the end of the day, I think the messaging there is, you know, don't drag ass. We want you guys to have passion, and we want you guys to play hard, and we want it to be evident for our fans and your teammates.
I think it's all true. It's all good things to say. I will say, just on the personality side, I've always felt like Jonah Heim's big problem was, bless his heart, he just seemed like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm doing this. I never thought it was a case of him not having a passion for it. It's just that he looked like the world was caving in on him every second. And as far as Trayvon goes, whenever I was around him in the locker room after a game or whatever, asking questions, I always liked to talk to him because he was always thoughtful and seemed like a smart guy and gave you straight up answers, and just like Micah Parsons was the same way. It was always it was honest, and I like both of them. And so, to your point, Calvin, yeah, I don't think he was a bad guy at all. I think what happens lots of times, and has happened over the course of time that I've been a sports writer, is that people get labeled certain things, and I think it's unfortunate. And sometimes you just got to learn. You got to know how to deal with these people. And I think it was clear to me that he was not on board with the new regime. I'm talking now about, of course, Trayvon. And then besides that, when you're not very good on defense and you've got a guy on there who's, as Calvin said, can be really good when he's right, it's hard to give up on that, and if he weren't, we can talk all we want to about Jimmy Johnson and the asthma field and all that, but that guy he sent to the asthma field was no good. The point is that the better you are, the more rope I'm going to give you. Okay, and they did that with Trayvon. They finally just got too far with all of it. Although, as Calvin pointed out before, they probably would have released him before the season if he hadn't been hurt then. So obviously, things had gone too far with him as for how much money they were going to pay him. So let's move over a little bit now and talk about, because these last couple of games, I got to tell you, I couldn't care less about how they do in these last two games. Last week against the Commanders, this week against the Giants. So what? You missed the playoffs. If you finish 8-1, who cares? Other than people make that out to be like it's something, like it means something going into the next season. It doesn't mean anything. You can be 4-15. 4-13 one season and turn that around and go, 9-8 or whatever the next season. If you won one or two games at the end of the year, it means nothing. I don't care. I want to know, what are the Cowboys going to do now? And so let's talk about that, Calvin. First of all, let's talk about what you think is going to happen after this is over. Is Matt Eberflus still going to be the defensive coordinator? Let's start there with that one.
Well, he's on shaky ground, as we all know. It'd be hard for them to bring him back. I think they're going to give up the most points in franchise history, the most yards in franchise history. They're 30 or 31 or 32 in a lot of defensive categories. So the scheme doesn't work. The personnel doesn't work. So I think he's gone.
And who takes that job? Is it just wide open then, or do you think there's a front or an inside man for that job now?
I think it's wide open. There's some candidates, but you got to wait for the seasons to end. Like all this stuff about Brian Flores, I don't think Brian Flores is coming to Dallas. I think Minnesota will pay him what he's supposed to get paid. If not, he'll be a head coach. One guy who I think you should look for is if Tampa Bay loses to Carolina and they do not make the playoffs. Todd Bowles, who's the head coach of the Bucks, he used to be a secondary coach here in Dallas, who's a fantastic coordinator. I would say he might be at the top of the list because the Cowboys always hire people they know, right? So they know Todd. So that's only if Tampa does not make the playoffs. So that would be what I would do. Another thing I would do is I would find a replacement for Micah Parsons. You can say Quentin Williams, the defensive tackle, is a great replacement, but off the edge, you got nothing. So whether it's in free agency or the draft, you have 2 first-round picks, get you a pass rusher. Then you got to take care of George Pickens. You got to pay him $25+ million per year. Then you got to pay Brandon Aubrey, who's your kicker. And one more thing, if I add, Tyler Smith, who is an all-pro left guard, they're going to let him finish the season at left tackle. And there's a possibility he might be your new left tackle next year. And for me, talking to Tyler Smith, he wants to know why they want to move him to left tackle, which he deserves to have that explanation. And you might have to increase his salary a little bit. Right now, Tyler Smith is the highest paid guard in the NFL, like at $23 million a year. So a little bit more than $23 million a year. So you might have to boost that number up a little bit. So those are the main things they got to do this offseason, starting with Eberflus.
Well,
all right. Can I interject one thing here?
No, let me just say real quickly. If you got to explain to Tyler Smith why he has to play left tackle, here's what you have to say. 2 words: Tyler Guyton. That's all you have to say. That's why we want you to play left tackle. Tyler Guyton's no good. Okay, Adam, go ahead.
Okay, well, I'm stuck on things that Calvin said earlier in that monologue. One,
monologue? Is that a shot?
No,
you asked man to give us 5 things, and you called it a monologue. Wow, boy, that's
a
tough.
Monologue is when one person talks.
And we know that when you talk, it is a monologue. Go ahead. Go ahead with your monologue.
Nevertheless, I forgot about the press conferences I had to cover today.
Some bitter inside stuff there.
That Calvin just drops in there. You know, the Cowboys only hire guys that they know. What a damning statement, right? I mean, just a beautiful way to just drop that in casually. And what a damning statement it is on the Cowboys hiring practices. So well done on that, Calvin. And then the other thing was, you know, I thought you said, you know, you got to replace Micah Parsons, but let's be obvious here, right? You're not replacing Micah Parsons.
No, you're not.
You're not replacing a generational player. I think you're absolutely right. They've got to get an improved edge pass rush, but they're not replacing Micah Parsons. I don't know. I don't know what edge rushers will be available at that point, but they ain't making that replacement anytime soon. So I'm trying to put this Cowboys season into perspective, and it just seems like it's the same rerun of year after year. I don't know that there was any real progress made anywhere.
Well, here's a couple of points I want to make about what Calvin said, and one was about George Pickens. Now, I've heard a lot of talk, Calvin, that the Cowboys would consider giving him the tag or tagging him, which would, I guess, put his contract right at about $28 million, right?
Yes.
And so, obviously, to everybody who understands that, you know, you tag somebody, you can do that for a year, and you can do it again the year after that on 1-year deals. In no way, shape, or form, Calvin, should they give him a long-term deal. I mean, I can see them tagging. If you want to tag him, then that's fine. I wouldn't do that either, frankly. And I've been all over the map with this guy.
We've all
'Cause I
been
think
all over the map. Kevin wrote his column this week about the things he got wrong, and he summed up our entire conversation about George Pickens, about how all over the map we have been this year, right?
Oh, but
Um,
because look, I stand by the fact that he's the most talented wide receiver I've ever seen play for the Cowboys. I've never seen a more talented wide receiver. Uh, but you cannot all of a sudden disappear for 2 games and then incur all the penalty, all the things we just talked about with Trevon Diggs, right? Not a bad guy, just is not playing by the rules here. Kind of does things the way he wants to do them. So they
you're
gave
just
him a
not
huge
sold on the reliability.
Yes, you gave him a huge contract, and then you regretted it, and then you wanted to get rid of him. It's the same thing with George Pickens. This is a guy that has not proven that if you give him a lot of money, he is going to be okay with that. All of a sudden, everything's going to be fine. And I just plus when you put on top of that, Calvin, the fact that this team is going to be so overloaded on the offensive side of the ball as far as their salary cap as compared to the defensive side. And that's where all the problem is. All the problem is on the defensive side. The offense is great, and I will concede that George Pickens is one of the chief components of making that offense so great. But at some point, you got to spend on your defense, and they are spending a lot on their defensive tackles, but they don't have any room left for anybody else.
But Kevin, to your point right there, here's the contrast, right? There's this reliability issue with Pickens, and if you tag him instead of giving him a long-term contract, are you then going to deal with a player who's pouting all year because he didn't get that long-term commitment?
Or do you get a guy like this year who thinks if I play good, if I do what I'm supposed to do, then maybe I get that long-term deal. That's the issue to me. If you're a Steeler fan, you have to be saying, look, this is what happened when they got him in a contract year, and so he's playing at his best because of that. And that's what you'd have to wonder. Maybe more so than the fact that how good the locker room is to him. I'm sorry, Calvin. Go ahead.
No. I think if you franchise him, it's a disaster because he's not showing up because he's got the same agent as Micah, David Muguleta. So you franchise him, he's not showing up. I go back. Me and Brad Sham went back and forth on this a couple of weeks ago. Brad was like, "I'm not signing him. Forget it." Then Brad said, "We need him. Let's just give him a long-term deal, right?" And I felt the same way, but because he is so unpredictable, that I'm giving him a 3-year deal, and I can get out of it in 2, right?
Yeah.
Because I know how he is.
Yeah. I could see that, but I still go back to my point of, so now you're going to have, let's say it's 25 million a year. You're going to have 25 million for him. You're going to have what, 25 or 30 on CD, and then you're going to have and then next year Dak's supposed to count 72 million, I think, against the cap. Although they can redo that. But at any rate,
do that. Mm-hmm.
You'll be around 100 million on those 3 guys. Let's just say that, and then you're going to have 80 million on the 3 defensive tackles. So that's 180 million on 5 guys. That's just an awful lot of money invested in things where you got an overload. You got an overload at wide receiver. You got an overload at defensive tackle. This is, to me, always the problem with the Cowboys. There's no one saying, listen, we got to move this money around a little bit more. We got to, it's going to hurt us, but we're going to have to make some decisions here. And in Jerry's mind, he can't make that decision. He loves offense. First of all, we know that he loves offense more than defense. Offense sells, and there's just too much sizzle with George Pickens. So I have no question in my mind that Pickens will be back. I'm just not sure this is going to work out long term. But if you can get an out, like Calvin says, then maybe that's the thing to do. So so we got that worked out. I like the Todd Bowles thing.
Do we have it worked out?
Well, what we said, we're going to give him a 2-year deal. We're going to a 3-year deal with a 2-year out, a club option after 2.
Okay, all right.
Then I like Todd Bowles coming back if Tampa Bay fires him. I think that's a good move. And also fits not only the fact that the Cowboys know him, he's been a head coach, and we know how much Jerry puts into that thing with the defensive coordinators, right? He likes the defensive coordinators have been former head coach. Why that's a qualifier for him, I have no idea. It is just the craziest thing to me that he makes that a stipulation, but whatever. I wouldn't have any problem with that.
That is by no means the craziest thing with Jerry Jones and you, Kevin.
So anyway, all right. So we got those two things worked out here. Yeah. All right. Let's talk about the draft just real quickly here. We don't have much time left. We got to get out here. If in that first round with those two picks, which I guess will roughly fall somewhere around 14 and 23, something like that.
I think right now they got 14. Dallas does. Yeah.
Yeah. So would you package those deals and move up to get that pass rusher if they identify somebody as an elite pass rusher?
If it's Lawrence Taylor, yes. But if not, I'm waiting at 14 and getting the best player available. You have a lot of holes on this team. You need a pass rusher, you need a corner, you need a linebacker. You might need a running back because Javonte Williams is a free agent. I'm not saying get a running back in the first round, but you got so many holes on defense that you got to get the best defensive player at 14. And then if you're at 23 or 22, that's the Packers spot. Get the best defensive player there or get you a tackle. Maybe you can keep Tyler at left guard and you can move Tyler Guyton to the right side. So, but to me, I'm not a big fan of packaging to get more picks because the 2020 draft, there's only one player left on this team from that draft class, and that's CeeDee Lamb. Right.
It's not good.
So just give me ball players. Don't give me a lot of players. Give me ball players. Give me guys who can play.
Your guy Will McClay needs a bounce back year here. He was doing a great job there, and then there's been a little bit of a stumble here in the last few years, especially in the offensive line where they had such good luck there, and they got Tyler Smith, and he's terrific. So I'm all for that. If Tyler Smith's your best player, and he can play left tackle, he's played it before, then put him at left tackle. This is not brain surgery, and play one of those other clowns at guard, and he'll be fine. And then move Tyler Guyton to right tackle and let Terrence Steele go. I don't think these are hard decisions to make. This is what you do. We'll see if they can figure that out. And to your point about the draft, I think the first 5 picks ought to be all defensive players, unless because you can get a running back in the 3rd or 4th round, and that's what they need to do.
I got breaking news. They don't have a 2nd round pick, and they don't have a 3rd round pick next
breaking
year.
News. That was breaking news to me.
They gave him away when they got Quentin Williams and all these other losers. So they go from Thursday night to Saturday. That's where they go to.
But to Calvin's point, Kevin, I agree with him wholeheartedly. I think you do too, right? I don't think if you package those first 2 picks to try and move up, you're not going to get a significantly impactful singular player. Use the picks to get the most impactful players you can because you've got to address multiple holes. I don't care how many players Jerry thinks he can turn those draft picks into. That's not the point. The point is to get ball players, and this team lacks them.
Yeah.
No question. I was just asking.
I mean,
I'm just asking the question.
Yeah. You go from pick number 21, right? You get your 14th, and say the Packers pick 21, and then the next time you pick is number 114. So on Friday night, Kevin,
good.
You don't even have to come to the Star for the draft. Just come Saturday afternoon because there's nothing to do on Friday.
I may not come at all, Calvin. I may not come at all.
Lucky you.
That's terrible. See, that's the problem with the Cowboys. You are a team that failed to make the playoffs. And now you got 2 first round picks and then nothing in between until, the last day of the draft. This is typically bad positioning for the Cowboys to be in this situation. Most of the time at most teams, when they're not good, then but they're going to have draft picks and they're going to be able to rebuild. Well, the Cowboys can't even count on that, and plus they're strapped with all these contracts. It's just one screw up after another with these guys. I tell you. This is a dark period for athletics in the Dallas-Fort Worth area in professional sports. We got, the Cowboys are a bust, the Mavericks are a bust, the Rangers are a bust.
The
Stars, that's it. The Stars. And I don't cover the Stars. As a matter of fact, we got a letter to the editor about that, complaining about the fact that Kalashaw and I didn't write about the Stars. It's like, come on, screw, shoot me. What am I going to do? I don't, it's not my sport. Sorry. Okay, Calvin, listen, we appreciate you taking the time and dropping in. What is it?
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
See you, Calvin.
See you, Evan. See you, Kevin.
All right, that's going to do it about our Cowboys segment of the podcast. So we're going to move over now and talk a little bit about the Mavs and about how this season just keeps muddling along. And, of course, the worst of all things that could possibly happen and the most predictable things that could have happened, Anthony Davis got hurt again just when he was starting to play well and make himself marketable. So now he's out for a little while. This is not good. Going into the trade deadline, he needs to be playing and playing well so they can trade him and get the most value they possibly could in return. Believe it or not, there's a lot of speculation out there that you might be able to get a first-round draft pick and more for him, which would be as much as the Mavericks could possibly hope, which tells you all you need to know about what's left of the Luka Doncic trade, that you would ultimately end up with a half season of Anthony Davis and then two first-round draft picks, essentially.
I think you're summing that up wrong.
You do?
Yeah, I think that you should sum it up as not what's left of the Luka Doncic trade, but what's left of the Nico Harrison legacy.
Yeah, well, that's already bad enough, right? But it just gets worse and worse.
I had this thought this afternoon on that, by the way.
Yeah, what's the thought?
I mean, I think in the 30 years I've been in Texas, we've all kind of thought that John Hart probably was the worst GM or had the worst tenure as a GM of any of our sports teams in town.
Outside of Jerry Jones?
Well, Jerry Jones did win a couple of Super Bowls back in the day, right?
Yeah.
But will Nico go down as the worst GM in DFW history?
Well, certainly, it was so fast, and that was the crazy thing, as we've talked about before, when he, before that Tuesday in February of last year, when I think it was a Tuesday, February the 2nd, right? Of this, this year.
Groundhog Day. And the Mavericks keep living it over and over.
Yeah, they do. Is that I thought he was doing a great job. Frankly, I thought, there were things to question, and there were certainly bad signs with the medical staff and all the rest of that stuff. We were hearing things about, he was a my way or the highway kind of guy, and that wasn't good. But he'd made a lot of moves that got them to the NBA Finals, and though they lost to the Celtics, as we've all said, well, shoot, the Celtics were just better. And I didn't have a problem. You're losing to a team that's better than you, but you get to the finals. That's a great year. That's a great season. That's what I wrote there. I think it's pretty much what everybody wrote. But then when you come out the next year and you trade the best player, I had a guy who I've been corresponding with, who played some college basketball, and he's not a Luka fan, and his point was, well, look how you ended up now, right? You got Cooper Flag, and even though Nico tried to take credit for it by saying, fortune favors the bold, that they ended up with Cooper Flag, they wouldn't have gotten him if they hadn't traded Luka, probably, right? They probably wouldn't have been so bad.
Cooper's just pure dumb luck. That's all that is. It's pure dumb luck.
But his point was, would you rather still have Luka and still, because you wouldn't be any good, right? Because Kyrie still would have gotten hurt. You still would have, and all the same guys would have gotten hurt. Daniel Gafford would have gotten hurt. Derek Lively would have gotten hurt. You'd still be in the same boat. And my point to him was, I'd rather have Luka than have Cooper Flag. As much as I like Cooper Flag, I think he's a real talent, and he's only 19 years old, and that's all great. But Luka's only 26 years old.
I think your point is you'd rather have Luka right now. Cooper Flag may well end up being a legacy type player. Luka is a legacy player.
Yeah, Luka is. You don't know. Yeah, you don't know what you're going to get from Cooper Flag. Luka was great almost from the very beginning, almost from the day he stepped on the floor. That was the difference between him and Dirk Nowitzki, for that matter. Dirk took a while to warm up to his status. Luka didn't, and I still think that Luka's
I mean, I saw something somewhere the other day that said he's becoming like the most popular player in the NBA. And that's not necessarily the reason why you care about him, but it shows you how he's regarded by the rest of the public as well. So I just think that's, yeah, to your point about, is Nico the worst GM? Yeah, he will be regarded that way because he traded the best player in this market that has ever been traded from this.
For nothing.
Yeah, for basically nothing. I'm trying to think of when we made those comparisons before about what the Cowboys had done before, what the Rangers had done before. I mean, A-Rod was a great player when they traded him, when the Rangers traded him.
But they were a broken franchise at that point in time. The Mavericks were coming off an NBA Finals season. That's the point. And your correspondence with this fan aside, I think that if the Mavericks still have Luka, their offseason moves last year may look a whole lot different, and this roster may look different.
True, because that's part of the problem is you didn't have a point guard. I mean, Luka's a point guard, so you don't have Kyrie. That's been the biggest problem with this team this year. They didn't have that. So yeah, they're a mess, and it'll be hard fixing this. But what they have to do is strip it down. They have to understand that you got to get rid of him. You're probably going to have to get rid of Kyrie as well. And you're going to have to just kind of start over. Unfortunately, they do have some nice young pieces, with Cooper Flagg and with PJ Washington and Derek Lively, if they could ever keep him healthy. Ryan Nembhard has done a great job as a point guard, filling in now. So they've got some parts there, and I think fans would be happy to grow with that. I think that this market would be good with that. But they have to get on with it. You cannot string this. The worst mistake any franchise can make is to think, well, maybe we can kind of string this along a little bit and see how it goes. You can't do that. You got to be brave, and you got to say, hey, we're sorry, but we concede we made a huge mistake in trading Luka Doncic. They've kind of said that. Patrick Dumont has said that they shouldn't have done it. That's all been said. The mea culpas have been said, and now you need to show that by saying not only we were sorry about what happened, and now we're sorry, but we're going to have to start all over again. So
yep, and I mean, you are going to come up in a month on a year since the Doncic trade, and you're basically going to have to relive that again because it's going to be the anniversary.
Yeah,
and you're going to have to acknowledge that we made one of the worst trades maybe in pro sports history. So that's the legacy, and that's all on the side. The Mavericks are again in a bad situation with having to trade Anthony Davis for pennies on the dollar.
Yeah.
And Kyrie as well. And
I tell you what, I didn't think they could get anything for him because of his age, because of his salary, because of his injury problems. But apparently, people who know a lot more about it than I do believe that teams are still sold on his ability to help you win if he's healthy. Because when he's healthy, he's really good. He's a good two-way player, and he can help you win a championship. He did that in LA. So people might be willing to do that for a year or two of that. I find it hard to believe, but the NBA is a different league from baseball and football. It's more of a, what have you done for me right now? And if we can get past, this year, next year, we'll live with that then. All right, let's move over now.
Can we get to Texas Tech, or have you forgotten about them again?
No, I haven't forgotten. I'm out here in Fort Lauderdale. They had media day today. Texas Tech players were there. I got to tell you, Evan, it's really interesting. We made this comment, a couple of us who were there. I mean, after about 5 minutes, it's just me and one other guy talking to Joey McGuire. I went over, I talked to Jacob Rodriguez all by myself. I talked to David Bailey all by myself. Usually you go to these things, if it's Texas, there'd be 30 players, 30 media members around every, microphone. So it was, and they were a pleasure to talk to. Joey McGuire is just a great talker, entertains any question. He's happy to talk about it, gives you a bright answer. I talked to him about Cody Campbell and the influence that he's had on their program, and he was fun talking about all that. So, one of the things we talked about is my column for tomorrow is that, or I guess that my column for Wednesday. Is today Tuesday? Yeah, Wednesday. Is that who would have thought at any point that Texas Tech could be at the center of this whole new universe of college football? But it is, and I've been around long enough that I think it's more stunning to me than it is the players, because the players that I talked to were kind of, they didn't know. They didn't grow up in Texas. The ones I talked to, they didn't know anything about it. They don't know. To them, Texas Tech is great. They got this. David Bailey's telling me that, I text Cody Campbell almost every day. It's like, really? You're texting the chairman of the Board of Regents every day? It's like, that's the kind of environment they've created out there. So it's a really crazy story of all the schools that have been impacted by NIL and the new wave of college football. I don't think that there's any program been more affected by it than Texas Tech.
Well, there are so many steps that just seem to be right in line with what you needed for all these dominoes to kind of fall. And I don't want to discount the personality and, for lack of a better term, the hospitality of Jerry Maguire, because, like you said, I mean, he's a great spokesman for this program, and to that matter, so is Jacob Rodriguez. So I think that Tech had some pieces in play before this year, but obviously when you add the impact that Cody Campbell has had with the dollars, that's changed the landscape significantly. And all I can say about it is, though, Kevin, I mean, we've joked about this before, right? But we all knew that what the Southwest Conference did in the 70s and 80s, and those schools were doing back then, I mean, that was kind of ahead of the curve, with basically paying players and buying players, and now it's legal, and so it's old Southwest Conference teams that are making an impact.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, Joey brought that up today. He said I run into media people all the time, the ones who played in college athletics, and they always tell me, "Oh, yeah, we were getting money all along." They weren't getting money like they're getting now. I will say that it just ratcheted up the level a lot. But the other really crazy thing for me about Texas Tech is that this is a really good defensive team. Now, can they beat Oregon? That's a great question. This is a great matchup because Oregon's really good offensively. Tech has a really good defense. And the question is, they've only given up 10.9 points a game this year. It's one of the best scoring defenses in the country. So, but it was against the Big 12. And this is not the Big 12 of the years of, the late, 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10, somewhere around there. There's not those kind of offenses in the league anymore. So how good is Tech's defense? I think it's good. I think it's good enough to hold Oregon under 25 points. The question for me is, how well is Baron Morton going to play for Texas Tech? He's kind of been, banged up all year. He's been banged up his whole career at Texas Tech, for that matter. The difference is that this week he's been able to practice, or going into this game anyway. He's been able to practice. He's moving around. He's not in a boot. So that's a big plus for them. If he plays well, I think they'll advance. If he is not able to be the difference maker in this game, then I think that Tech may struggle, and they're gonna have to hold Oregon under 20 points.
Well, I mean, Oregon played the best defense in the country, right, in Indiana.
Yeah.
And they scored 20 against Indiana.
Well, and that's the thing. I read one commentator thought that that Tech will be the best defense they played all year, including Indiana. So and Ohio State. So did Oregon play Ohio State? I don't remember if they did or not.
Oregon did not play Ohio State.
But they did play Indiana. So
they lost. They lost Indiana 30-20 at home.
Yeah.
And I would think that Texas Tech has got to hold Oregon to 3 touchdowns or less. I mean, I would say they could. You said they can hold them to under 25 points, and I would agree that it's got to be no more than 24, 3 touchdowns and a field goal to have a shot to win this game. Oregon's really fast, man. That offense is really fast, but I'm really interested to see what Texas Tech can do, because I think that to further my point from before, I think they've just really leaned into the personality too of what Texas Tech wants to be from Kirby Hocutt on down, and it's worked for them. So I think that there is a personality and a culture there that's working really well, and it's certainly working on defense. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens in Miami.
Yeah, it is. I'm interested. That'll be a fun game to cover, and it's 11 o'clock start or noon start here, so I'm always big on that. Love the 11 o'clock noon starts. All right, let's talk about some of the other bowl games. In the Cotton Bowl, of course, we have Ohio State and Miami. I'm going to tell you something. I still have not gotten the bad taste of that Miami A&M game out of my mouth. My gosh, what a bad football game that was. I cannot, seeing it up close was even worse, I'm sure, than seeing it on TV, because it was abysmal.
It was bad on TV. I can't speak to how much the wind played a factor in that game, but it was a bad game. It really was. And it makes me think that Ohio State will win this game in a walk.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be close. I don't.
I'm sorry. I hate to be super critical, but I don't trust Mario Cristobal in big game coaching moments either, to be perfectly honest.
Well, at the end of the first half of that game, they got the ball at midfield, 2 minutes left, and they're just letting the clock run. And it occurred to me, I mean, they're just standing out there. It occurred to me, do they think we can't score, but we can't give the ball back to them and let them possibly score? Then I thought, if that's what he's thinking, then let's just throw the white flag for the second half, because you're not going to get a better chance to score than from midfield with 2 minutes left.
Yeah,
and they lucked into a couple of throws, and then they blew that shot.
Just the little bit that I've seen of Miami over the last 2 years, both clock management and team discipline just doesn't really impress me.
No, they're not good. So that'll be a walk. Okay, let's talk about the Rose Bowl. We got Indiana and Alabama. I'm Kalen DeBoer has gone as far as he's going to take this team. I think that Indiana is the best. I think Indiana is really. I think Ohio State's the best team left in the tournament, and the fact that Indiana beat them really tells you how good they are. Those are probably the two best teams left. But I do think that Indiana will beat Alabama. I think Kalen DeBoer, they will hang him in effigy in Tuscaloosa, and then he will prove that he has just made the biggest mistake in his life, leaving Washington to go to Alabama.
I will be interested to see, because as you know, I am an SEC snob, and I will be interested to see how Indiana plays an SEC team. I think Indiana's defense is world class. They've got the Heisman Trophy winner in Fernando Mendoza at quarterback. I'll just be interested to see if Alabama and the SEC pedigree changes the dynamic at all. But I'm with you. Alabama has been a really uneven team for the second half of the season, so it's hard for me to think that Indiana's even playing the best in the SEC.
Yeah, I'm not sure how this. When I made my predictions the other day, they seem pretty good, but I'm not positive that I'm feeling good about it right now. So we've covered the Orange Bowl, the Cotton Bowl, the Rose Bowl. What do we need now? We need
We got the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans.
Yeah,
between the University of Mississippi and those Georgia Bulldogs.
Yeah, I don't see Ole Miss winning that. I was surprised they played so well in the first round. I don't see them doing that again. I just feel like that Georgia will win this game easily.
And as you can tell with the barking that's going on here in this household, we are full of dog fans here.
Yeah, y'all are.
Some of them are actual dogs too. But look, Kirby. I think Kirby is the best coach in the country right now. I think this rest has enabled them to get some of the offensive line healthy, and I think that defense is playing on another level. And if that defense had played the way it's played the last half of the season, this talk about Indiana and Oregon might be, or Indiana and Texas Tech's defense might be a three-way conversation with Georgia.
Yeah, for sure. No
I
question
think
about that.
I think Georgia wins that game in New Orleans, and then we'll see where we get to in terms of the semifinals. But yeah, I mean, I expect chalk here on these quarterfinal games.
Yeah, me too. I do think, though, I think the first four teams were the best four teams in the country, and then everybody else was really close. I thought in that top eight, and then of course, as it turned out in that first game, after watching Miami and the Aggies all over themselves in Kyle Field, and yeah, the win was a factor. Certainly was a factor on the kicks, but it wasn't a factor otherwise. I mean, people were just bad throws. Both quarterbacks were terrible in that game. The defenses were okay. I think they were pretty good, but it was hard to tell. There were so many bad throws. And Carson Beck, he can't get out of the way of a parked car. I mean, he's just slower than slow. There was one time they were down there on about the inside the 10 and wide open field in front of him, and he starts to run, and it looks like a statue. And he got about 3 feet and he went down. He to me, they're not similar in their style so much, but I regard him as the same ability as Quinn Ewers to me. He's a guy who will go to the NFL and he will be a backup quarterback, and maybe, of course, Quinn's getting a big shot now to play for the Dolphins, which is more than I would have thought, but that's only because Tua Tagovailoa just blew up. But maybe Carson can do that. But it felt like in that game, they just told him, yeah, we don't have any faith in you to make this play. We have zero faith in you to make this play, so we're not calling it. And how can that happen? If they go in with the same game plan against Ohio State that they had against A&M, they'll get beat by 30 points. It won't even be close.
Yeah, I mean, you spent a lot of money to bring Carson Beck in there on a transfer, and if you're then saying we don't have faith in you in this big moment, what does that say about your decision-making process?
Well, no kidding. So anyway, my point was that, I think Texas could have beaten either one of those teams. I mean, they did beat A&M, and I think they could have beaten Miami. And so that,
I agree.
So this whole argument about everybody gets so, wound up about who deserves to be in and who deserves to be out, and they're so certain about all of it. It's like, yeah, Notre Dame would have, I think, beaten either one of those teams. It was.
Yeah, but Kevin, I mean, I think the argument on the tournament has now become like, well, it should be 16. It should be 16. And my argument after watching the last 2 years is, you know what? 4 was probably the right number, because there's a great difference between 4 and everything that comes beyond it.
No, there is, but they were never going to stick with 4. I mean,
right?
And they went from 4 to 12. I mean, maybe 8 would have been fine, for that matter. And look, as much as I love the whole idea of the Cinderellas, we got to get rid of the conference automatic bids for the conference champions. I just, someone brought up to me, what if we had a play-in for the group of 5? What if Tulane and James Madison had played each other to get in? And maybe that would have saved everybody the embarrassment of those 2 games, because that was awful. But the flip side of it all, Evan, is that, and every time Tim Kalishaw writes about, how he doesn't like the playoffs and it was fine the way it was, and he talks about the bad numbers, it's like, have you gone back and looked at the numbers of the BCS and of the early years of the CFP when there was 4 teams, and look at those scores? Most of them are bad. There are very rarely are the games very close.
I just think it's, we're turning football into trying to model it more and more after the NCAA basketball tournament, and it's just never going to be. It's never going to be the same entity. And I do appreciate the idea of a playoff. I don't know what the right number is, whether it's 4 or 8 or 12 or 16. I just think no matter what you end up with, you're going to still have those arguments on the fringe about the team that doesn't make it. Yeah. And in retrospect, look, and as much as I wanted to see James Madison, and James Madison put up a good fight. They were clearly outmanned.
Yeah.
They were out. There was too much speed on Oregon's side, but they kept fighting, and I was proud to see that. But yeah, the bottom line is neither one of those teams were real candidates to beat Oregon or to beat Ole Miss.
Because here's the difference, and everybody wants to talk about the Cinderellas. You can have a Cinderella when you got 5 guys on the floor at a time, because you get one guy who gets really hot for you and can carry you. That doesn't happen in football. In
It's just the ratios, right? Look,
Yeah.
It's one of 12 players on your roster, or more likely one of 5. In football,
Yeah.
you're talking about 22 guys.
Yeah.
And
It's just
chances
too,
of
it's
you
too
hitting
many.
on the right number are not going to.
All right, before we get out of here, I want to talk about one thing that Joey McGuire brought up today to a question that I asked. And by the way, Joey gave a big shout out to the Dallas Morning News, and he didn't even know I was standing there. He said, when he wrote something, he talked about being at Cedar Hill, and he said, in the Dallas Morning News, the biggest newspaper in the state said this, whatever, And I thought that was nice of him to give us a shout out like that. And everybody went, the Dallas Morning what? No, just kidding. Just kidding. So anyway, but Joey brought this up. Here's how he would fix college football, which was interesting. He said he would, get rid of the conference championship games, which you should, right? We all know that. But he would start, well, actually, no, I take that back. He did not say it. He said have the conference championship games the week of Thanksgiving, that week, on that Saturday. And then he said you start with the tournament the very next week. And he said you give us 7 days every week, and we just play every round of the tournament. He said then we play the national championship game on January 1st when it should be played. He said, and then January 2nd, we have, the portal opens and everything happens. And that way nothing happens before the end of the season from that standpoint, and everything else stays the same. And his point is, being an old high school football coach, that's how we do it in high school football, right? You start playing your playoff games as soon as the season's over, and it just rolls right on through. And he said that you can talk about all the academic things and all the tests you got to have and all that kind of stuff. He says we all have tests as it is now. We're all taking our tests and going to classes and doing all the things we're supposed to do. So it's not a problem. I got to tell you, I need to look into this a little bit more, but I'm liking what Joey said.
Well, there's certainly an element of there's some sense. It makes some sense, right? There's some practicality to it for sure. I think
you get the whole season done in one semester.
Yeah. I mean, and listen, there's not. You play the conference championships the week of Thanksgiving, and you roll right into that. You're done with finals by that next week for those who are going to class.
Yeah.
I think it makes a lot of sense. I think the other element that's kind of an X factor is the whole bowl system and what TV element that plays in all of this. But everything that you just laid out sounds incredibly sensible. On that note, I just want to leave this since this is the end of the year. I want to leave my last statement as this for the year. I think it would be incredibly appropriate for the Cowboys to beat the Giants and find a way to finish 500 in an odd number of game season. And then you factor in that the Cowboys could go 8-8-1, and the Rangers went 81-81, and it really turns Arlington into the definition of the mid-city.
That was good. I like that, Evan. I can't top that. I'm just going to let that one be the last note for us on this last podcast.
What a year in Arlington that was, huh?
Boy, just in general. What a year. What a year. We're going to be glad to write off 2025. I know that. All right.
Listen, also, people, if you haven't read Kevin's end of the year thing where he makes fun of himself and he talks about all the things he got wrong, it's always a great read, and it proves that the guy has a great ability to make fun of himself, which is a huge, huge virtue for a writer. So look it up online and read it.
Thank you, Evan. Always great to work with my pal, Evan. He's like a brother to me, and I just want to say that I can't stand my brothers, and that's why I said that. No, just kidding. Just kidding. Especially if my brothers are listening, they can still beat me up.
Debbie would like a pina colada now. Now go.
Yeah, I will. I'm going. All right. So from everybody in here to everybody out there, thanks, and we'll see you next year.